Welcome to a new season of Kabbalah and Coffee, and it's really a year is a journey. Every year of life is a journey, and we've spoken about how during the holiday season, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, we equip ourselves with the various different resources that we will need to be able to make it through the year productively and purposefully and technologically. It's working? Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Namely that Rosh Hashanah is, each holiday is like a reservoir. And Rosh Hashanah is the reservoir of commitment in which we commit ourselves to God and to the purpose that we've been put here in this world. And that's the most fundamental and elementary guidepost that a person has to have, around which a person organizes their life. We're committed to something. For a Jew, it means being committed to God, to the purpose for which I'm here. Without that, we have no real center. So we're sort of pulled in all different directions and just sort of flailing out there. So we have to be committed. And the same is true for a person in their professional life, business, to be committed to a particular objective. Every company has a mission statement. This is what it's about. And that's what Rosh Hashanah is. Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, of forgiveness, is the reservoir and the resource of forgiveness throughout the year. Our ability to forgive each other comes from Yom Kippur. And God's continued patience and willingness to forgive us. And something that's sometimes overlooked is the necessity for us to be able to forgive ourselves. We start off with a very powerful commitment, and the reality is that it's hard to always live up to the standard that we would like to. It's hard to sustain a level of commitment that we would probably always like to have. And so invariably throughout the year we'll falter, fail, make mistakes, do things that we regret that we shouldn't have done, and so on and so forth. And Yom Kippur is the reservoir of forgiveness, which means we have to be able to know, first of all, that God forgives us, and we should also forgive ourselves and not hold ourselves to an unrealistic standard by which we measure ourselves, and if we don't attain that, then we consider ourselves to be failures. At the end of the first portion of the Torah, and repeated again in yesterday's Torah portion of Noach, God says that I have put into man an inclination towards weakness and evil and immorality and self-centeredness. It's called the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, or in Kabbalah it's called the animal soul. And we're all programmed with that. It's part of our spiritual DNA. So to expect that we should be able to sail smoothly through life and not have to overcome challenges and adversity, both internal and external, is unrealistic, because that's not the way the program was set up. So we didn't create our weaknesses. It's a question of whether we indulge ourselves or succumb to them, but the weaknesses, the proclivities that different people have for different behaviors, it's the way we're wired. That doesn't mean that we are a slave to them. We have the ability also to control them. But the fact, we shouldn't be shocked by the fact that we have the challenges that we have. I'm talking more about the internal ones, because that's the way we are all programmed. So that's Yom Kippur. And if we can find it within ourselves to forgive ourselves and forgive others, knowing that we all have inherent weaknesses and challenges that we have to overcome, then we can be happier and more joyful in life. And that's what Sukkot is. Sukkot is the reservoir of being joyful and being happy. And it's interesting, Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, Yom Kippur is 1 day, Sukkot is 7. It's really, and then you have 8 days, Shmini Atzeres, and then you have really 9 days with counting Simchas Torah. So, of all of the three, which one do we put most emphasis on? Right, being joyful, being happy. Which, the fact that we put so much effort into that implies that it may not be that easy otherwise. So we got an 8-day program each year to totally imbibe ourselves with the energy of joy so that we can call upon that throughout the year. Because a joyful heart is an open heart, and an open heart can grow, can move, can make things happen. A sad heart is a closed heart, and that's not a good way to live. So, particularly the way the holidays lined up this year, we went straight from Simchas Torah straight into Bereshit, the first Torah portion, without any break. And before we knew it, we were right into the second portion, which is Noach, and the story of the flood, which we read about yesterday. And thus it becomes also Shabbat is both the culmination of the preceding week, and it's also the source of blessing for the week that follows. So Shabbos is like this pivot that connects time, it connects the week before with the week ahead. And every Shabbos is colored, and its character is filtered, if you will, through that week's Torah portion, which becomes the lens, so to speak, through which we view the week past and the week ahead. We see it through the lenses of the weekly Torah portion. That's our prism or framework or context through which we live and view the world and interpret events and life and so on and so forth. So, the story of the flood, of course, is the famous story of Noah being told by God that there's an impending flood, which actually took 100 years to 120 years to actually happen. And that he should build an ark, which he did, and the flood came, and the world was submerged in water for a year. Rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, and Noah built the ark for himself and his family, the 8 members to his family, and of course all of the various different animals and reptiles and so on and so forth, who were all on the ark and protected. So it's not simply happenstance that we happen to start off the year effectively reading this portion of Noah. It's really the way we start the year, because we have the holiday season, which is a whole zone unto itself, and then like the first foray into the year is Noah, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in stormy waters. surrounded by these churning, tumultuous waves, which is what the flood is. In other words, we have a month of holidays, sort of go into a different mind frame, a different place, a protected place, and then boom, with a thud, then we were thrust right back into the world. And the world is flooded. The world is full of churning waters, which affect us psychologically. When you see a storm around you, you get stressed and preoccupied. And invariably, there's all sorts of storms that surround us, even if we're not in the midst of hurricane season. And for most people, making a living is a constant preoccupation that people have to deal with. And that used to be the primary preoccupation. Now we have, with technology, we are preoccupied every single second. There's never been this type of assault on our senses and attention ever in the annals of human history. At any given second, we are on the receiving end of emails and texts and WhatsApps and pings and tings and you name it. 5, 6, 7 things calling our attention, but immediately the impulse is we have to, you could think it's the president on the other line, and if we don't respond immediately, basically the country's going to collapse. I must return this right away. There's this constant pressure. There's the nature of the technology is so instantaneous that there's constant pressure to respond, which is having all sorts of effects on society. Our attention spans are becoming increasingly less as we're pulled into these instant communications. Well, it's very hard to focus. And so the preoccupation level, stress levels are much higher than ever before. Technology was supposed to make life easier. Less stressful is actually making things more stressful. So these floodwaters today are even more threatening in a way, in terms of threatening our spiritual integrity and spiritual focus than ever before. So what's the solution? When we are surrounded by stormy waters and we want to sail across the sea, across these stormy waters to be free, what's the answer? What's the solution? The solution is you have to go onto the ark. That's the only place where we can find protection. What do you mean, build an ark? What is that supposed to mean? Well, the Hebrew word for ark is the word teva. Teva means the ark. God said to Noah, Boi el teva, come into the ark, you and your family, and that's where you'll find protection. The Baal Shem Tov gave a beautiful interpretation on this and said that the Hebrew word teva actually also means word. Teva means word. So Bo el hativa means come into the word. And what that means is that if you want to find some peace in your life, you want to find some tranquility, you want to find some focus, you're going to find it in the word, the words of Torah and the words of prayer. That is our only defense against the stormy waters that churn around us. It is in the holy and sacred and true and divinely inspired words of Torah that we find an oasis of calm, of purpose, of centeredness, without which we will be just flailing out there in those stormy waters. So, as a new year starts, we're all being called by God to come and enter into the ark, come and enter into the Word. Now that the holidays are over, If you want to successfully journey through the year ahead, as the world is submerged by this water, the place where you're going to find the strength to have perspective, to have values, to have standards, to have goals, to understand your place in the world, is in the Word, in the words of Torah. That's where you're going to find it. So God is calling each and every one of us and saying, come into the ark. This is the ark of Torah. This is where you'll find protection. So, along those lines, before we get to the text that we're going to be studying, as we always do when the class on the Sunday coincides with the beginning of a new month, a new Hebrew month, we talk a little bit about the Kabbalah of that month, the particular energy of that month, and that gives us a perspective for the month ahead. So this month, which began yesterday, is called Cheshvan, and its complete name is actually Mar Cheshvan. Mar Cheshvan, M-A-R, is the way you'd write it in English, Cheshvan. Now, the Hebrew word Mar actually means bitter, because in a sense it's the most bitter of months, in the sense that it's the only month that has no holiday whatsoever. Not major and not minor. Every other month has something going on. Starting with the next month, Kislev of Hanukkah at the end, Teves is Hanukkah in the beginning, Shvat, you got a little Tu B'Shvat thing going on, Adar you have Purim, and then you have Pesach, and then you have Lag BaOmer, and you have Shavuos. There's something going on. In Cheshvan, it's like nothing happening. So it's bitter in that sense. It also, the Hebrew word mar also means droplets. Mar midli, we find that term, droplets of water, because this is the beginning of the rainy season. On the last day of Sukkot, actually not the last day of Sukkot, really the first day after Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, we began the prayer for rain, for Geshem. So this is the beginning, particularly in Israel, of the rainy season. So the word mar also reflects that. The word mar also in Hebrew means master, or like mister. You would say in formal Hebrew, Mar Tzvi, Mr. Tzvi, or Mar Hello, Master. It's sort of a deferential kind of term, master. So how did Cheshvan gain this sort of reverential term, Mar Cheshvan? So Mar Cheshvan is like saying, Master Cheshvan, this month of reverence. So it's recorded in the Tanakh, in the Torah, that when King Solomon actually completed building the first temple on the first day of Cheshvan, first day of this month, but he deferred the dedication until 11 months later, and so till the first of Tishrei, the year after. And so Cheshvan cried foul to God. I was like, just sidestepped. The temple was completed in my month. It ought to have been inaugurated in my month. And so God promised the month of Cheshvan that the third temple, the future temple, the temple will be built by Mashiach, will be inaugurated in the month of Cheshvan. So therefore the month is called Mar Cheshvan, with reverence, because in the future this month will be, in fact, not only will it have its own holiday, it will be in many respects the most celebrated of all of the months. So that's the Mar, as the Mar side of Cheshvan, the three meanings of that word Mar. Mar Cheshvan, also in Aramaic, actually means moving lips. And what that is a reference to is that is the residual energy of the month of Tishrei, from which we have just come, of all of the holidays, in which there are more prayers than in any other month, a tremendous amount of praying goes on, a tremendous amount of words between the prayers and the singing and the words of Torah. And the idea of Mar Cheshvan is that it's these words and this energy is still sort of ringing in our lips. It's not like there's this clean cut. Okay, we had the high holidays done, over, that's behind us, and now, it's like anybody I call at any time of the year is always telling me to call after the holidays. It's never a good time. Call after the holidays. Which holidays? So if you call any time between June and August, after the holidays means after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So then you call right in the beginning of October, and they say, call me after the holidays. Oh, that's Thanksgiving. Oh, okay. After Thanksgiving, call after, the holiday, the secular holidays. And then, so then you call in January, call me after the holidays. That's already Pesach, the Passover. So it's always before a holiday, and you always got to call after, but I've never found the exact precise moment when it's the right time in certain instances. So anyway, we are after the holidays, meaning to say, but they still reverberate. So even though it's a month that is bereft of any holidays, but there's also a reason for that, because there was such a strong saturation of energy in the month of Tishrei that we've got a lot of fresh fuel in the tank to be able to sort of unleash it. And here's a month that has nothing else going on, which creates an environment in which we can use that energy, because it immediately tests us. Because what's the idea of a holiday? The holiday means that there's something inspirational going on, not of our own doing. The holiday, it's a festive time. So we're inspired by an energy not of our own making, and then that carries us. But now we have a month where there's nothing like that. There's no holidays. There's nothing inspiring coming from any other place other than from within our own selves. So here's the test. Okay, did we fill up our knapsacks or our tanks during the holiday season and equip ourselves with the right equipment and resources to make it through the year? Here's the first test, the month of Cheshvan. What do you got in your knapsack? What did you pack in there during the holiday month of Tishrei? It's actually in Tanakh, which means in the Book of Kings, this month actually has another name, and that's the name in Hebrew, Bull. Not to be confused with the English word bull, but it sounds the same. In Hebrew, bull actually means flood, and it references the fact that the great flood, which we read about in yesterday's Torah portion during Noah, started in this month, in the month of Cheshvan. So it also the word mabul, also a bull, also means puddles. And it means that during this time, when the rainy season starts, it creates puddles and openings in the ground. So, apropos to that, because this is the beginning of the rainy season, the real prayer for rain, actually, in the times when the temple started on the 7th day of this month, the 7th day of Cheshvan, because when the temple stood in Jerusalem, every Jew was obligated to celebrate the holiday there, the holiday of Sukkot and Passover and Shavuot. And the most distant travelers would take them 2 weeks to travel. It's like flying to Australia. It takes 2 weeks to get there, 2 weeks to get back. By the time you realize that you've landed, it takes 2 weeks. So it took 2 weeks to them. So 2 weeks from the last day of Sukkot is the 7th of Cheshvan. So people did not pray for rain until everybody was home. Because if they would have prayed for rain and it would have started raining, it would have made the journey home very difficult. Which means that the 7th of Cheshvan is a very powerful lesson of Jewish unity and mutual interdependence. Because say somebody lived in Jerusalem, so he went home and he was, from the temple, he was right there. And he needs rain. Well, he's got crops or what have you. But he couldn't pray for rain until everybody was home. In other words, we are all mutually, our fate is mutually sealed to one another. So a person cannot adopt the attitude of everything's okay in my house. My house is all in order, so all is well with the world. No, there's still Jews who are traveling home. We can't pray for rain until they're home and have made it home safely. So we really defer the prayer for rain until the 7th of Cheshvan, which is when the last of the people, the pilgrims who had made the pilgrimage to the temple, had reached home. So there's 2 cycles to the year in a broader kind of sense. There's the rain cycle, which starts now, and then there's the cycle of dew, which starts on Pesach, on Passover. On Passover, on the second day of Passover, first day, we pray for dew, and Sukkot we pray for rain. What's the difference between them? Dew comes from the ground, and it's constant. Rain, on the other hand, falls from the heavens and is not constant and is unpredictable. Not only is it unpredictable, but rainfall actually is contingent upon human behavior. Now that's something you won't hear from the weatherman. But particularly in Israel, as we say in the Shema, V'hoya im shemoya tishmo el mitzvosai, if you will listen to my mitzvot, v'nosati gishmechem bitam, I will give you your rains in its appropriate time, and so on. God clearly makes rain fall contingent upon the performance level of the people. And in Israel, this is a major issue because there's not a tremendous amount of rainfall typically. And when there's a drought, there's serious problems. And in the days of yore, they used to fast when there was droughts. And so serious business. If there's a drought, the whole agri-economy collapses and people starve and chaos, right? These are 2 pivots in terms of the year. So there's 2 sets of 6 months. There's 6 months from Passover until Rosh Hashanah, from Nisan to Tishrei, and then there's 6 months from Rosh Hashanah, from Tishrei till the next Passover. The difference being, the month of Nisan, the month of the Exodus, is considered the birth of the Jewish people. It's like we start all over again. We're newborns. We're a newborn. And so we need a lot of TLC. So God gives us all the TLC that a newborn needs. A newborn needs a constant supply of milk, and a newborn cannot be subject to a system of reward and punishment and consequences, where the mother is only going to nurse the newborn if the newborn sleeps for more than 35 minutes at a time. And there's no such thing. You have to nurture the newborn unconditionally. in the same manner when we came out of Egypt, because we were a newborn people, spiritually fragile. God provided the dew, which means there was a constant supply of energy from God, shepherding us through the desert, taking care of all of our needs, no strings attached. It wasn't performance-based. Everything was provided for. Manna from the heavens, everything was provided for, right? Well, the Rambam talks about, Maimonides talks about, education and how you phase in education. And part of maturing is when we start to understand consequences for our behavior, and parents start to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior, or withhold reward, and so on and so forth. That's a sign of maturity, when we begin to understand that there are consequences to our actions, and our actions resonate at different levels and at different places, right? Now, 6 months after the Exodus, now the month of Tishrei, this is now when we have matured and blossomed into a people who are now accountable for our own actions, particularly by his master's wife of Potiphar, who tried to seduce him numerous times, and what ultimately protected him from succumbing was the visage of his father, the image of his father. That's what kept him. So this month of Cheshvan corresponds to Yosef. What's the connection to the month of Cheshvan? In the same manner, in the same way that Yosef was geographically isolated from his family and worked to maintain the connection that he had created with his father and his roots, in the same way, this month of Cheshvan, because it has no holidays, it's like a spiritually isolated month. And Menashe means that we have the ability to connect to all of the inspiration and energy that we experienced during the holidays. We can maintain a connection to that. We can draw from that, just like Yosef continued to draw from his identity and his connection to his father's house. And it's interesting, therefore, that the word Menashe, who is the tribe of this month, shares the same letters as the Hebrew word neshama, which is soul. So if you just rearrange the letters of Menashe, it spells neshama, which is soul. Which is the idea. What is the soul? The soul is a godly and transcendent force within us that is not bound by the strictures of time, and can therefore rise above the immediacy of circumstance and connect to a higher transcendent energy, namely the energy of Tishrei, that is continues to flow if we open up ourselves to it throughout the year. That's why Rosh Hashanah is called Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. It's not called the beginning of the year, which the Hebrew would be the Tchilat Hashanah, the beginning of the year. It's not called the beginning of the year, it's called Rosh Hashanah, which means the head. Because Rosh Hashanah is to the year what the head is to the body. The head, namely the brain, sends signals throughout the nervous system, which enables bodily function. Of course, the limb, the organ, has to be open to be able to, that there's no blockages, to be able to receive the brain waves and that are being transmitted. In the same way, Rosh Hashanah continues to transmit energy throughout the year. We have to make sure that we don't clog up the pathways, the arteries, the neural, so that those neural messages can continue to find us. Every month also has a particular Hebrew letter which is associated with it, and the Hebrew letter of this month is the letter Nun. Now, Nun is one of those 5 letters that come in 2 varieties. There's the way that Nun appears in the middle of a word, which is called the bent over Nun. And then there's the way that the Nun appears at the end of a word, which is the straight line, elongated Nun. What that symbolizes is the bent over Nun is like the posture of a person who's bent over like this, right? Which is indicative of submission, like bowing down. That's the shape of a Nun. Submission and surrender to a higher power, namely the power of God. And so that's the posture. You don't have to physically have that posture, unless you're in the middle of some yoga, thing on Shabbos morning. But psychologically, spiritually, we have to have this posture of submission to God. And then it says, when our time is up in this world and we come to heaven, then we adopt the posture of the upright Nun. Then we can stand before God, be judged, and be proud of the life that we lived. So if we're this way when we're in this world, we'll be this way in the next. That's true of the future of our own personal soul destination, and it's also true of the future world of Mashiach. If we're like this now, which means we are humbly committed to God, then when Mashiach comes, we march upright, proud, knowing that we contributed to this. We made this happen. We were a part of this, rather than being sheepishly embarrassed of, well, I didn't really, it's like I'm coming to the party, but I'm like a gate crasher, like a wedding crasher. I'm an invited guest because I made, I'm a part of this thing. So that's the Nun. In fact, Mashiach, one of the names of Mashiach is Yinun. The whole idea of Mashiach is connected to Nun, which means this upright posture, standing before God proudly. It also means that when Mashiach comes, we will be upright in the sense of being proud of who we are as Jews, as opposed to being bent over towards the world. It's healthy to be bent over to God, but not to the world, not to yield to the world. We should be upright. A Jew should be proud of who we are and not intimidated by the world. So it says in the prophecy, Mashiach comes, "Va'elech eschem koimemios l'artzenu." I will take you upright to the Holy Land, which means we won't feel the need to compromise who we are, to yield, to concede to the prevailing culture or to the prevailing morality that's out there in the world that is so consuming that we feel like we have to yield to it. No, we have to march to a different drumbeat. We march to the drumbeat of Sinai, not to the drumbeat of MTV or whatever other, trash is being put out there that all of a sudden becomes the new accepted norm of morality in this country. We have to march to the drumbeat of Sinai, upright. So that's Nun. And it's actually the word, the letter Nun is also a word. Every letter is also a word. The word Nun is related to the Hebrew word Nin, which means progeny. Offspring, progeny, which is connected to Mashiach. And first of all, it says Mashiach will come when all of the souls that have to have been brought into this world will be brought into this world. There's a certain amount of souls that have to be born into this world that to enable Mashiach to come. So here's the result of all of these progeny having been brought into this world. But it also means that progeny means both in the literal sense, having children, that's one manifestation. But mitzvahs are also a progeny. Mitzvahs is also a form of bringing life into the world. Progeny is bringing life into the world. Every mitzvah brings life into the world. So Mashiach coming means the accumulation of all of the mitzvahs, of all of the progeny that we have therefore brought into this world, accumulates with the coming of Mashiach. So each month also corresponds to one of the senses, or to one of the sensory powers. And the sensory power of this month is the power of smell, power of reach, power of fragrance. In other words, it's the month of aromatherapy. So, yeah, make sure to book your appointment with the aromatherapist. Which is interesting because we said that the tribe affiliate of this month is Menashe, whose letters rearranged to spell the word neshama, soul. And as you just mentioned, on every Saturday night when we end Shabbos, we smell the spices, the besamim, which is for the purposes of compensating the soul's departure, or the additional soul's departure that joins us on Shabbos. So in other words, there's something that we can do to be able to make up for the diminished spiritual state that invariably occurs on Saturday night, and that's smelling the besamim. So on a macro level, Shabbos vis-a-vis every week is the equivalent of, on a macro level, the month of Tishrei vis-a-vis the rest of the year. Because the month of Tishrei, which we're just coming from, all of the holidays, is the 7th month. Just like Shabbos is the 7th day. So we've been talking a lot about this transition from Tishrei into Cheshvan. A month of Tishrei saturated with holidays. Every day is something unique and something special, and something from that to this month has nothing special about it. So that's a macro form of what happens every week as we transition from the holy day of Shabbos into the 6 days of the week. So how do we start off Saturday night, our entry into the new week? We smell the besamim and we say we can fill this week with purpose. Yeah, there's you can't be in the Shabbos zone all the time. Shabbos is only one day. There's 6 days of the week. We can't be in the holiday season forever. Well, some people think you can, but others, it's the holiday season, and then the year begins. But that doesn't mean that we can't make the week meaningful. Doesn't mean that we can't make the year meaningful. All of these things are all the tools, and ultimately, like I said, to go back to the beginning, the most powerful weapon, the most powerful tool that we can have is the teva, the ark, which is the words of Torah. This is where our soul derives its nourishment. The words of Torah nourish our souls, our minds, our hearts. It gives us, feeds us precisely what our souls are craving, the nourishment that they're craving, to be able to have the strength, the muscles. The soul needs its muscles worked out and with a healthy diet, just like the body does, to be able to maintain a pristine state of spiritual health.